Well, as I've been promising now for a couple of days, this is the big one. All right, no, actually, we've had big videos all this week. It's been unbelievable, Cern. We talked about the change in the world that took place this week. So many things between last Thursday with SpaceX taking off and yesterday with that amazing demonstration of telepathic human activity. The world has changed, and it's just a matter of time, I think, before it may take. I think you just said it'll take a while for the world to recognize it.
I think so. I mean, one of the next things that Elon and Neuralink are going to try to solve is blindness.
Right.
And I think the rest of us may be a little bit blind to what is actually happening.
Yeah, and one of the things that was part of last week, and one of the things that I think people are also missing, is that the Tesla FSD project is eons ahead on AGI or AI compared to everybody else. That its ability to recognize the real world, to work in the real world, to do it quickly, very quickly, and have to iterate on so many different things that are going on around it all simultaneously. You can't make any comparison to that with, say, the robots that we're seeing, or even ChatGPT or something. It's an entirely different level. And I don't think most people really get it because it's become, as some people said this morning on X, almost boring to watch the rides. So it's not, take into consideration what has to happen to make those rides happen. But we're going to be talking about the next level, which is Robotaxi.
Yes, we are. As excited as I am about humanoid robots, Robotaxi is almost as exciting.
Almost, yes.
Almost. It's a pretty fascinating opportunity. We'll dive into it today.
Okay, all right. Well, and I think if I understand it right, what you're going to be talking about a lot is going to be, what does this look like financially downstream? And other people have attacked this. In fact, I did a couple of videos on it earlier this year. Kathy Wood obviously has done some substantial work in this space, but you've got your own take, and that's what we'd like to see this morning. And I'm fascinated to see where you go.
Sounds good. Yeah, this actually is potentially a very complicated business model. There are many facets to a robotaxi network. There's a lot of different considerations, a lot of different ways to, for a Tesla to price this. And we'll get into that today. I think contrasting it with humanoid bots, it's a much simpler business model in my mind. It's less complex.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So yeah, so the sorry, just advance. Here we go. So in my mind, there's sort of three ways that Tesla can tackle this. And these are not mutually exclusive. And actually, I think that we're going to see some combination of all three of these. There's what I call the fleet operator model, where companies like Hertz, like maybe Uber, other companies in Europe, a company like Mr. Green is already preparing for this. They're acquiring fleets of Teslas, and they will operate them in a robotaxi network, city to city.
Can I add one more to that? Small fleets. So, for instance, our friend Brian Wong, he intends to have I think he's purchased or has an order in for 10 Cybertrucks, and he intends to have a small fleet.
Yes, and I have an order for 75 Cybertrucks, so I have a small fleet as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. The second model is individual owners. So somebody owns one or two vehicles and they would like to make some money on the side, maybe help defray the cost of the car or potentially even pay for the vehicle. That's another model to consider.
Yes.
And then there's the Tesla only model. And let me just say at the outset that from a financial perspective, this is the best way to go. It would be easier and cheaper in some ways for Tesla to do this, but I don't think that we're likely to see Tesla exclusively doing this. And I'll share why as we get through this.
Sure.
Okay, so let's dive into the first one first. But
Okay.
before we do, let's set the stage. For when Tesla sells vehicles, they make a profit by selling the vehicle. And this is a chart that shows the gross profit per vehicle delivered over the last few years, broken out by quarter. And you can see generally Tesla makes between $7,000 and maybe $15,000 per vehicle sold in gross profit. It
Okay.
fluctuates with market conditions and so on. And lately it's been a little bit lower. Historically, it's been a little bit higher, but maybe the average is $10,000 to $12,000.
Right.
Okay. All right. On a net profit basis, that's more like $5,000 to $10,000. This chart summarizes the three models. So the 5 to 10,000, if Tesla sells EVs, that's in the lower left.
Right.
Okay. That's how much Tesla can make by selling a vehicle. And maybe there's some opportunity to make money off supercharging and maintenance and so on over time.
Okay.
So there's some additional revenue. Premium connectivity, maybe insurance. There's some other opportunities for Tesla to make money, but it pales in comparison to the opportunity if Tesla offers these vehicles as a service.
Right.
So for the fleet operator model, and this is looking at Tesla's profit opportunity, depending on utilization, and we'll get into this discussion in a minute, but utilization is the key variable in the profitability of a robotaxi network.
Right.
How much the cars are being utilized and generating revenue. So I'm just showing here high or low versus high utilization.
Okay.
And in the fleet operator model, it ranges between $10,000 to $24,000 a year in net profit to Tesla.
Right.
And that's after sharing revenue with the fleet operator.
Right.
And for individual owners, it's very similar. The profit opportunity is between 10 and 25,000.
Okay.
If Tesla goes it alone, it's between $25,000 and $57,000 because they don't have to share the profit with anybody.
Sure.
Okay. Now, in that case, likely the pricing would be different. They wouldn't have to, maybe charge as much because there's not as many mouths to feed, so to speak. They're only collecting the revenue and taking the profit for themselves.
Right. But by the same token, you don't want to undercut your fleet operators or your individual operators. So it's likely that they would stay pretty close to what the going rate is.
Correct. Yes. Unless it's a world where it is Tesla only.
Right,
And
right.
as some people suggested, Tesla should stop selling vehicles,
Yes.
just make them for themselves and put them in a robotaxi network and run it themselves.
Right.
And I'm validating that idea in terms of, yes, that would be the most profitable way if that made sense. Now, it's contrary to everything that Elon has said
Yeah.
over the last few years. But from an economic standpoint, yes, that would make sense. But I don't think that they'll do that. I think they're more likely to use the Tesla only approach to help seed certain new markets.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's not enough vehicles available by fleet operators or individual owners, Tesla can supplement that by putting some of their own vehicles in.
Right.
Because from a robotaxi consumer experience, you want to tightly manage the wait times. You want to make sure it's a great experience. And so you need a certain number of vehicles in each market for it to be a great experience.
Right.
And Tesla can be kind of that moderating force that adds or takes away vehicles in certain markets.
And it might also be that certain of the niche vehicles would be something Tesla would be more inclined to do. The two-passenger vehicle, might not be as interesting to fleets or something. I don't know. I'm not saying that's the correct answer, but something like that could be where Tesla would be largely in that business.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I'm having trouble advancing the slides here for some reason. Okay. So before we do any modeling, we have to make a whole bunch of assumptions.
Okay.
And this is just a collection of some of them. So in the number of them I'm going to show you, I'm assuming that the average speed of travel is 25 miles an hour.
Okay.
Now, it's an average. So sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. But it'll average out to 25 miles an hour. The average trip length is 5 miles an hour.
5 miles. 5
5
miles.
miles an hour. Sorry, 5 miles. 5 miles. Thank you. The percent of empty miles. So a robotaxi takes somebody somewhere and then it has to drive a certain distance to pick up somebody else.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that if the Robotaxi does, let's say a 10-mile trip,
Right.
that it has to drive 4 miles to get somebody else. So 40% empty miles.
Okay.
Okay. I'm also assuming that the average loading and unloading time is about 2 minutes. That Tesla's share of the network revenue is about 30%.
Okay.
Now, there's an interesting relationship between this and the price of FSD,
Okay.
which I'm assuming here is $500 a month, up from the current 200. But if FSD is higher, then Tesla's take rate needs to be lower.
Hmm.
And if FSD is low, then Tesla's take rate can be higher.
Got it.
They're opposite ends of the same seesaw.
Okay.
Okay. So some people argue that, FSD should be, free. Other people argue it should be super expensive. Well, the take rate's going to have to adjust for that. Okay. I'm assuming in my models that the vehicle and battery life is about 600,000 miles.
Okay.
Um, I've seen some people model less, but I also do include some pretty good maintenance costs.
Hmm.
And certainly, things like tires, you're going to burn through tires pretty fast. So in my model, I've got quite a bit of, extra expense for things like that.
Okay.
But I think this is probably pretty reasonable in terms of the battery life and so on for the vehicle. FSD subscription cost of $500 a month. And then I'm modeling out vehicle utilization between 30% up to 65. And again, this is the key variable in this whole model. And I model it out sort of in 5% increments so you can see
Oh, okay.
what that looks like at those different levels.
So can we come back to the slide for a minute?
Yes.
So on the first four of these, well, the first three really, the average speed of travel, average trip length, and empty miles is this, Cern just pulling a number out of thin air, or are you using taxi information or Robotaxi, or I'm sorry, or Uber information, or any other information that you are gathering this from?
Combination of both.
Okay.
And also, as we'll see, we'll vary some of these variables. We'll change them so you can see what the impact is.
Okay.
And you'll discover it's not huge. The utilization is the key variable.
All right.
And of course, the pricing per mile, right? The cost that you charge the user.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. So just to get our arms around utilization. So at 30% utilization, that means in a 24-hour day, the vehicle is being deployed in the Robotaxi or it's operational in the Robotaxi network for 7.2 hours a day.
Okay.
Okay. Now, during those 7 hours, it's giving trips. And again, 40% of the miles of those trips are empty.
Right.
So no revenue. So, this the combination of utilization and empty miles that greatly reduces the revenue potential of a vehicle. So you can easily see here why utilization is so important. The more time that the vehicle's in operation during the day, the more opportunity there is to give trips and generate revenue.
And is this, Cern, is this net utilization, meaning the car could be out of service for a car wash or for charging, or just because the owner wants to use it for a trip or something, and then also subtracting out the time that it's sitting idle between rides?
This is including the time that the vehicle owner is using the car for him or herself, for cleaning, just sitting idle somewhere waiting for a ride.
All those things. Okay.
All those things. Yeah. Right. So yeah, it's another way to maybe think about this is in the 30% scenario, that's 7.2 hours. That's the amount of time the car is actually moving somewhere.
Right. Right.
Right. And it might be moving empty and not earning money, but it's moving.
No.
Okay. So as utilization goes up, tire wear goes up,
Sure.
charging costs go up. I mean, there's a lot of extra costs as the vehicles move more.
Right.
Okay. This shows for each utilization rate from 30% to 65%, how many trips per day given the earlier assumptions,
Right.
and how many miles per day. So at 30%, you're doing about 20 trips a day and you're going 164 miles.
Mhm.
And at 65% utilization, you're doing 42, 43 trips a day and traveling 355 miles.
Okay.
Okay. So again, you can see here, if you're going twice as far, you're going to have twice the revenue opportunity,
Sure.
right? It's just, that's pretty straightforward. So utilization is the key factor. And so if a robotaxi network has too many vehicles in it, that's going to drive down utilization.
Sure.
So the robotaxi network operator wants to maximize utilization as much as possible, but at the same time, make sure there's a great experience for the customers.
Moreover, you're going to have territories where you're going to have more 24-hour opportunities
Mhm.
and other areas where you're going to have almost no opportunity after 10 o'clock at night before 4 in the morning or something of that nature.
That's a really good point. There are certain markets where it's more 24 hours for sure. The pricing in those markets are likely to be a lot lower because you can make it up on volume.
Right.
And other markets, the cost per mile will be higher. Yep. Okay. Let's look at the revenue components of trips. The way that I've modeled it, it's similar to Uber, similar to a taxi, where just to get in the car, you pay a base fare,
Mm-hmm.
right? The car has come to you, it's incurred cost to come to you. There's a base fare. If you change your mind in 2 minutes, you're still paying something,
Right.
right? Or if you take the car just, around the corner,
Yeah.
you're still paying for something. It's not, the cost, the mileage revenue in that case would be so small, it wouldn't be worth it. So there's a base fare, and then the lighter blue is the mileage fare, the distance-based fare,
Okay.
and that's the largest amount.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's idle time fare. So if you want to take your sweet time getting in and out of the car, that's fine. But you're going to pay for it as though the car is still moving.
Sure.
So it's similar cost in terms of per minute.
Right.
The other thing too is if you get a little sleepy and you decide to take a nap, then the robotaxi operator doesn't have to worry about trying to kick you out,
Yeah.
right? Or you come home late, you had a little too much to drink, you fall asleep in the car,
Yeah.
you're in a safe place, like stay there and sleep, right? And you're going to pay for it, but that's a good situation. And the robotaxi operator doesn't really care because they're making money either way.
Right.
So I think there should be an idle time fare. Maybe the first couple of minutes are free, but
Yeah.
beyond that, maybe it kicks in.
Right. Right. Okay.
Okay. These are the little complexities that matter.
Sure. Absolutely. Oh yeah. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff like that Uber and Lyft know about that
Yeah,
the average citizen doesn't have a clue. Yeah.
that's right. Now, in addition to trips revenue, which on this chart is just the blue bars,
Yeah.
there are other revenue opportunities that are present. And we can already imagine some of them. So one of them is advertising.
Sure.
And I haven't really given a whole lot of thought to the numbers here. I'm just putting them in here so you can see them.
Mm-hmm.
There's also what I call curated experiences. So let's say I am in a new city and I want the car to kind of show me around.
Yeah.
Well, you should pay something for that. Maybe it takes me to the sites, it takes me to certain restaurants. And by the way, those restaurants might pay Tesla for those customers.
Yeah.
So there's revenue opportunity there.
Absolutely happens. Believe me, there's plenty of been on those trips, been on those,
Yeah.
been on those buses.
Yep. So, in some markets, this could be a very significant portion of the revenue.
Right.
There's also entertainment and connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an opportunity. There's also the ability to use the vehicles to process AI, distributed inference.
Okay.
I don't know yet
Yep.
how meaningful that could be, but that's an opportunity. And that's a case where when the car is idle, it can make money.
Right.
And when the car is moving, it doesn't. So that helps offset the amount the car is just sitting there. But it's likely to be very small.
Right.
Okay. And I think we're just scratching the surface here in terms of other revenue sources that a robotaxi network could offer.
Yeah, I like your idea about showing you the town I mean, literally because it's a robot and because it will have Grok and all the rest, you could set up your own tour and
Mhm.
you could automatically have the voice telling you about things along the way, giving you a preview of where you're going. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I like that.
It could be an amazing experience because the voice could be in the voice of the historical
Right.
characters,
Yeah, right.
right? So it's like going to Disneyland, but not going to Disney.
Sure.
You have that experience wherever you are in the world, learning about the place that you find yourself in.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
that could be interesting. Yeah. Okay. So for the purposes of this model, these other numbers are very small, not really material.
Right.
Okay. Let's look at the situation where there's a fleet operator. So this is model number one. Tesla needs to share revenue with the fleet operator. And in my model, I've got Tesla's take rate at 30%.
Right.
So the fleet operator is paying Tesla $500 a month for FSD, but they're getting 70% of the Robotaxi network revenue.
Hmm.
Okay. And so that's the blue bars and the red is Tesla.
Okay.
And you can see at the different utilization rates that 30%, that's about $60,000 per year per vehicle to be shared.
Hmm.
And at 65%, you're up, close to $130,000 a year.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is from Tesla's perspective now. The red bars are from the previous chart,
Okay.
and the yellow, the orange is the FSD revenue. So Tesla at 30% gets about $25,000 a year per vehicle revenue.
Hmm.
And at 65%, it's almost 45,000
Per vehicle. Yeah.
per vehicle per year.
Now you're starting to talk about my numbers for Optimus. I think your
Yeah.
numbers too. You came in around
Yep.
60,000 a year also, right? I think so.
Yep. Yeah, you get up there, but the number of bots far exceeds the
Yeah.
number of
Right.
vehicles
Right.
ultimately. Now, this is also from Tesla's perspective. This is showing the potential net profit and the net profit margin. So I'm looking at net profits between 40 and mid 50% and net profit per vehicle of $10,000 to $24,000 a year.
Okay.
Okay, at the two extremes of 30% utilization to 65.
Right.
So pick the utilization number that suits you, and you
Mhm.
can see what the likely profitability could be there. Okay, so a pretty attractive business. There are not too many businesses in the world that have a 40 to 55% net profit margin.
Right. And are you going to talk about what you think Tesla's 44% costs will be on this? Or
I'll share that a little bit
okay.
coming up. Yep. Yep. Okay. Now let's look at this at scale. As you know, I like to look at things when you apply a certain number of vehicles to a network, whether it's bots or whether it's robotaxis.
Sure.
The lower left, 10 million robotaxis. Okay, the different colors represent the different utilization rates,
Okay.
and what this represents is net income. Okay, so you can see there, the chart there, the first number is 500 billion in net income. So it might be between 100 billion to maybe 250 billion in net income for the lower left scenario.
Okay. Now,
Let's say we get up to a robotaxi network where
oh,
there's 50 million vehicles, which is
okay.
kind of in the middle of the chart. At 30% utilization, you're looking at 500 billion in net income for Tesla.
Okay.
And at 65% utilization, you're looking at 1.2 trillion in net income with only 50 million vehicles. Now, you could say, okay, there's going to be competition. Okay, fine. But how many autonomous vehicles are we going to have in the world one day? There's about 2 billion vehicles right now in the world. How many of those are likely to be replaced with robotaxis? To me, it seems quite likely that you're going to have north of 100 million.
Okay. Hmm.
I don't know what Tesla's market share will be.
Right?
Again, you can pick your numbers on this chart and
Sure.
look at what the potential is. Even if Tesla only has 10 or 20 million vehicles in Robotaxi network, this looks like a pretty good business to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good business.
Okay. And to put that into perspective in terms of market value, and I'm just using a PE of 30, which I arguably is ridiculously low for this type of business.
Sure.
Just trying to be conservative with some nutty numbers. But at a 10 million Robotaxi network, at 30% utilization, you're looking at a $3 trillion market cap just for that business. Follow the red line up as you get to 50 million, that's a $15 trillion business,
Right.
and so on out. Now, if the utilization it can be higher than operating at 7.2 hours a day, then follow up to the different lines. And so let's say at a 50 million Robotaxi network, you go from 15 trillion on up to 36 trillion at 65% utilization.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's on another planet compared to any other business ever.
yeah. Now it will take a while to get here. I'm not saying this is next year. This may be 15 years from now for all I know.
Yeah.
But does that matter?
No.
Probably not, right? But this is the world that we're headed for eventually. And again, I fully expect there will be competition.
Sure.
There are companies that have shown an ability to operate autonomously.
Right.
But ultimately, will they be able to do it at the cost, at the low cost that Tesla will be able to operate at?
And
Right. And that's
or
going to be
and
the
or
ultimate challenge.
and or like anything else, there could be niches again. We could be talking about, a niche for tractor rentals or tractor robotaxis, or we could be talking about a niche for other kinds of large buses, um, 16 passenger vehicles, all kinds of other niches that could be out there that Tesla just isn't interested in.
Think about the Cybertruck for a second. If you are a contractor and you're going around different job sites,
Mhm.
these guys are spending easily $100,000 on their trucks.
Right.
They've sunk a bunch of money in their vehicles and they drive around and the truck sits there for a good portion of the day.
Right.
Might it not be better economically for them if they put their money into a trailer
Yeah.
with all their tools and everything that they need in the trailer, and then get the Cybertruck from a Robotaxi network to tow their trailer to the job site? So they could save themselves that capital cost and just use the network to move their trailer around.
Right.
So, right. So there's opportunities like that I think
Sure.
become really interesting. And like you said, again, different types of vehicles, different form factors for different purposes. Yeah, the sky's the limit here in terms of opportunity.
Right.
So that's the big picture. And I hope that makes sense.
Okay.
Now, let's look at sort of the costs. This is from a fleet operator's perspective.
Okay.
So they have their revenue. In this case, it's just under 45,000, and I'm just looking at 30% utilization here. Now, one of their biggest cost is FSD at $500 a month.
Right.
Okay. And again, that could be lower, could be higher, and if it is, then the take rate has to adjust.
Right.
I factored in the cost of the vehicle. I factored in the cost of financing at 8.5%. I factored in the cost of charging, cleaning, parking, insurance, a marketing cost. They're marketing perhaps their own business. And then other operating costs, just buckets of costs of $1,600, $1,700 a year. Tires and maintenance, EV taxes and other. And that leaves a gross profit per vehicle of 17,000.
Got it.
So I've looked at other folks' models. I think we're all kind of in the ballpark
Okay.
in terms of the various costs.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, the profit, of course, is going to depend on the per mile that you can charge.
Yes. Yeah. And now that's the ultimate thing. And that's going to depend on competition. It's going to depend on a whole host of factors.
Right.
Okay. But yeah. And then this is the same table, but looking at the different utilization rates. I'm sorry, this is a very busy chart. But for those interested in the numbers, you can see how all the costs scale up as you utilize the vehicle more. There's more cost for tires,
Sure.
right? More cleaning, more charging.
Right.
The vehicle cost scales up because you're wearing the vehicle out faster.
Right.
The things that don't change are FSD, parking, insurance, right? I even have the marketing go up as if you're utilizing the vehicle more, the company may then be able to spend more on marketing. So I scaled that up with revenue.
Sure.
Okay. This is how it looks for the fleet operator, their own income statement. They're looking at 23 to mid 30s margins.
Okay.
That's a pretty good business. And there's certainly some opportunity here for, the prices to come down perhaps and for their margins to come a little lower. Okay, but they're making anywhere between $10,000 a year on a vehicle up to 31,000. And what I've done here is compare Tesla's net income versus the fleet operator. Tesla in red, the fleet operator in blue.
Okay.
At different utilization rates, who is making more money? And in my model, I've got the fleet operator making more over time or making more as the utilization increases. Because they're taking the lion's share of the risk here. They've got the capital cost of these fleets of vehicles.
Right.
So at 30%, they're making about the same profit as Tesla, but at 65%, they're making 40% more. And that's what that line on the top, it shows the ratio of the profits.
Right.
Okay, so this to me feels like a pretty fair split. The fleet operator is doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right, to maintain and organize these vehicles, clean them, change the tires and all that stuff.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's look at some variables. The left bar is my base case, the 5-mile trips. What happens if the trips are half the distance? Well, your base fare revenue component goes up. Just to get in the vehicle, it's going to cost you some money. Your trip revenue shrinks, but there's also more idle time revenue because there's more people getting in and out of the vehicle all the time.
Right.
But generally, shorter trips are better in the way that I've modeled it here. And conversely, the third bar, 20-mile trips, that's a little bit worse. But if 5 miles is the average, then fine. You can have some short and some long, and it all averages out to a reasonable number.
Right.
But I wanted to show you kind of the difference,
Sure.
the potential revenue difference. This is the trips revenue per vehicle per day. So it fluctuates between maybe 140 something to about 200, depending on how far the vehicle is going each time. Okay. Now, what happens if the car can go 20% faster? Well, that helps because it can do more trips. And this shows the promise of a world where one day where there's no traffic lights, the far, far distant future,
Yes.
where there are no human drivers anymore, in the far, far distant future, if ever, and the cars can just thread themselves through the traffic intersections without stopping. The efficiency that's gained from that is quite nice. Now, I think that's kind of pie in the sky. I think it'll be a long time before fire trucks and police vehicles and ambulances and other kinds of vehicles are fully autonomous. But perhaps one day those are too. Okay. What happens if they're instead of 40% empty miles? What happens if it's 25%? Obviously, that helps. And if it's 50% empty miles, that hurts. So the distance the vehicle has to travel empty and not earning any revenue, that makes a difference for sure.
Right.
And then lastly, if we don't charge people to get in and out of the vehicle, then if they take a nap, And if enough people do it, that's going to hurt,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I think they should charge for that idle time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to pay for the nap time, then fine, so be it. The robotaxi operator is not harmed by that.
Right.
And it's a safe place for somebody to take a nap, sober up, whatever the case may be. Right.
I don't know if you've ever had the experience of accidentally being sort of locking, not exactly locking yourself out of the car, but kind of locking yourself out of the car and then coming in and trying to break in, so to speak, to your car. But they have an alarm system inside the car which plays da 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 da. It's this huge, massive, loud noise. I'm guessing that they could do something like that with nappers if they felt like they didn't really want the nappers in the car.
Yeah, it might work for nappers, but not for somebody that's not sober.
Completely, yeah, knocked out, yeah.
Yeah. And then this shows the bottom line impact of all those changes. And you can see from a net margin perspective, this is to the fleet operator, it makes a big difference for them, some of these variables. Right. So, you
Yeah.
know, this stuff matters. These little things will matter. They'll need to optimize this as best they can
Sure,
on every given day. And that's where some, AI powered system could be tremendous.
sure.
Okay. And then for Tesla, there's some sensitivity to these
As
factors
well,
as well, but not quite as much as there is for the fleet operator.
sure,
All right, similar, but not as severe.
right.
Their margins don't take the same kind of hit. And then same thing in terms of this is gross profit per vehicle, and the ratio of that. So again, if it's a very complex thing, and I've already modeled out some of the complexity here. There's a lot more to it.
Sure, sure, sure.
Okay. Let's look now individual owners. You and I have a vehicle that we want to put it in the Robotaxi network. We potentially could give it to a fleet operator, or potentially we just do it directly with Tesla ourselves.
Right.
Okay. In that case, we might handle our own cleaning and things like that and charging.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have Tesla sharing the revenue, 70% to us, 30% to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it looks. Here's the expenses. There's some expenses that we don't have. We don't have to worry about marketing,
Mm-hmm.
potentially parking, cleaning, because we're doing it ourselves. And I've got the FSD cost here at only $200 a month. So the current cost.
I see, I see.
Okay. To me, if you're just putting your own personal vehicle in there, yeah, you're making some money, but you're not a commercial enterprise. You should charge commercial entities more for that. Whereas an individual Tesla, in my mind, should charge them a little bit less.
Yeah, and I've been kind of making this point as well. In fact, my theory would be maybe even the individual commercial operator would pay more than a family that never uses it for robotaxi.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, I've even gone as far recently to say that it should be close to free as possible because the safety benefits to all of humanity are enormous.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? Put people in the safest cars possible. It would probably also drive EV sales.
Right.
Just another factor. So, I get some pushback on that because Tesla's invested a lot of money in FSD.
Yeah, and
they should get a return.
If it was $100 a month, I mean, that's now you're starting to talk about less than what you were paying for gas. So
that's right. Yep. All right. And then from Tesla's perspective, they collect the revenue from the network plus the FSD. So these charts will start looking pretty familiar now. Here's their margin opportunity. Net margins between 40 and almost 60%.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's Tesla only in terms of revenue per vehicle. Sorry, this is the third model now. This is Tesla going alone. Let's say they decide
right
to say we're not going to deal with fleet operators, we're not going to allow individuals. We have a dedicated robotaxi, and we are not going to sell it to anybody.
Right.
Again, highly unlikely, but they could use some of these vehicles to help in other markets to make sure there's enough vehicles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The profitability here, 40 to 45%. So that's a really attractive model.
Right.
What I'm doing on this screen is going back to the first chart, but instead of showing over 1 year, I'm looking at it over a 5-year period.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say somebody buys an EV every 5 years.
Right.
In that case, Tesla's earning between $5,000 and $10,000 on selling the EV, but in a robotaxi world,
Right.
they're earning between 50 and over 100,000.
Right.
Or if they did it themselves, it's 125 to 200,000 plus.
Right.
So this is a very different business model than selling EVs. And this is why a lot of us are so excited about the prospect of Tesla solving FSD and creating a robotaxi network.
Mm-hmm.
This is the reason that Kathy Woods at ARC has such a crazy high price target for Tesla in the out years,
Right.
because the economics of the robotaxi business are absolutely enormous. Now, just worth mentioning that ARC has not yet built bots into their model.
Right.
That is not part of their price target.
Right.
When that is, look out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
Um,
now, Cern, is this the end of your presentation?
I believe it is.
Then I have questions. I have questions.
Yes.
I think you never told us at any time that I can remember what your estimated cost per mile would be.
Well, those are super secret numbers.
Oh,
No,
super secret.
no, I'm just kidding. I have a base fare of $1.50 just to get in the vehicle.
Okay.
Okay. I have the cost per mile at $1.
At $1. Okay.
Yeah. And then I have the cost per minute of idle time that's based on the speed of the vehicle, works out to 42 cents a minute.
I see.
Okay. So if you want to take a nap, it's going to cost you 42 cents every minute you're sleeping.
All right.
Okay.
And so obviously if the cost per mile, I'm sorry, if all of your models change radically, if that drops to 50 cents.
Yes.
And a lot of people have talked about even a 25 cent, like in China or India, might be as low as 25 cents. So, and those vehicles, I am assuming, would be a much less expensive vehicle to begin with. So you would have some reduction in depreciation amortization cost. There might be a lower cost per mile driven because maybe the battery is much smaller or I don't know, more efficient. So many
Yeah.
things can go into it, but potential for other considerations in terms of the price per mile.
Yes. And just to go back to this last chart for a second, this sort of shows you if Tesla wanted to be extremely aggressive in bringing down the cost per mile,
Right,
then the Tesla only model is the place to do it because there's such a cushion here.
right, right.
If you did it with the individual owners or the fleet operators, you're going to squeeze them.
Yeah.
Now, there's room below $1 a mile. I'm not suggesting that's the
Right,
price.
right.
Just showing a model with some numbers.
Right.
It's highly likely that it's going to be more than that initially,
Yes.
and then over time it comes down.
And also probably going to be adjusted as it is now with Uber. It's going to be adjusted based on conditions on the ground at any given time. Outside the hottest restaurant or venue in town, if you want to get it at the door, it's going to be very expensive. Or even at the airport, it's very much more expensive if you get it at the actual airport than it is if you get it at a hotel a mile away. So
That's right. And I think, like Uber, I think there could be surge pricing.
yes.
So if there's a concert, a
Right.
sporting event, and you want a vehicle, you're going to pay more for that because the demand is so high.
Yep.
I
Very
think too,
much
it's
hour.
likely that there's going to be a subscription
Right.
model where you're a Robotaxi network member.
Mhm.
So think Amazon Prime.
Sure.
You might pay a set amount per month just to be a member, and for that you get discounts on the cost.
Right.
So if you are a commuter or something and you need to use this every day, that would make sense.
Okay. The next one on my mind, which I think everybody's thinking, because I know I've thought about it since day one, is how are we coming up with the potential TAM? How do we get to 10 million taxis or 100 million taxis? Partially, I'm assuming that would be replacing existing taxis and Ubers and other kinds of public transportation. But part of it, I'm assuming, would be adding on. How are you figuring all that?
Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be sort of a different TAM at different points in time.
Mhm.
But I like to think sort of what it might look like ultimately. And ultimately, in my mind, we are moving from a world where people tie up a bunch of capital in purchasing or leasing a vehicle
Mhm.
for their own personal use
Right.
to using transportation as a service.
Mhm.
So, I've joked about this before. Most of us don't buy airplanes,
Yeah.
right? We use airlines as transportation as a service,
Right.
what as a service. Most of us don't have our own trains,
Right.
right? We use that as a service. So we're going to a world where automobiles will be the same kind of model. Now, hopefully it's more sophisticated and, hopefully I can call up a Robotaxi and have it arrive at my house precisely when I want it to be there,
Right. Right.
right? Because when you need to leave, you need to leave,
Right.
right? So if that's the case, then the TAM is basically every personal vehicle that's on the road
Mhm.
because it's going to drive down the cost of transportation for everybody. And why would I tie up the capital? And why would I have that ongoing cost? And why would I pay for insurance? And why would I deal with all the headaches of maintaining and owning a vehicle?
And what could I do with that garage, with that space in my garage?
Right. And so if we think about that for a second,
Mhm.
that could cause a bit of a boom in terms of renovations.
Mhm.
Or like a lot of people, they use their garage for storage anyway. So maybe they
Right.
would use more of their garage for storage, buy more stuff.
Right.
And also if vehicles are being utilized more,
Mhm.
you don't need as many vehicles in the system,
Right.
and therefore you don't need as many parking lots.
Right.
And
Oh, parking
therefore
lots
now
are,
there's a real estate opportunity,
yes.
right? And so that's also interesting longer term.
Mhm. Mhm. So we've also, I've also considered, or I've contemplated that you would have the potential for more travel because people would say, it only cost me $10 to go to the beach. I'm going to go way more often than
Yeah.
it would if I'm driving my car. It's going to cost me a lot more. You have the opportunity of getting people out. Unfortunately, public transportation people won't like this, but getting people out of subways and regional trains and into these kinds of but also Elon has talked about getting people out of short haul airplanes that
Yeah. If you think about it, so let's say people, they want to go to Disney.
yeah,
If they live 500 miles away, their chances are they're probably going to fly.
right,
But a robotaxi, you could take a trip overnight.
right,
You could sleep,
right,
you arrive there in the morning, refreshed, ready to go,
right.
and the cost of that is likely to be pretty low.
Yeah, and even more I want to say, without even having to think about it in terms of sleeping in the car, I live 3 miles, 3.5 miles, I'm sorry, 3.5 hours away from Vegas. If I'm going by myself, I'm flying.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's still going to take me a half an hour to get to the airport, got to sit in the airport for an hour.
Yeah.
Then I get on the plane, it takes an hour to get there. And then I got to rent a car or find transportation. So it's still taking me 2 hours to get to Vegas. It's only saving me an hour and a half. If I got another person in the car, I'm absolutely driving,
Yeah.
not going to fly. So there's all those that's I think what Elon was talking about in terms of short trips.
Mhm.
A lot of the short plane trips will go away. What about on the other side of the coin? And I used to consider this a bigger problem until a minute ago when I had a brain fart um, on this. I had my moment when I'm like, oh, I see. So originally I was like, how many people will actually do the individual Uber? I mean, the individual turning their car over to the fleet, because I know people that will not, including somebody I'm married to, will not turn her car over to the fleet, even though I would.
Yeah.
And then like I said, I just kind of realized, well, it doesn't really matter because if they don't, the fleets and Tesla will pick up that slack. But has anybody ever done any kind of polling or anything to see how many Tesla owners might be willing to put their cars out part-time?
Well, I think if you ask people now, the polling results are going to be what they're going to be, and I think there would be a significant number of people that would say no.
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because the idea of other people in my car, it
Right,
sounds
right.
kind of crazy. Although my kids are probably more disgusting than anybody else that could be in the car.
I Turo'd my cars. I had no problem with that.
Yeah. But if you think about this for a second, if we are turning depreciating machines
Yeah.
into money printers,
Yes.
I always come back to the economics.
Yep.
The economics will be such that it'll be too good for most people to pass up. Why would you not have your car make money for you if it's just sitting there doing nothing?
Right.
Economically speaking, it does not make sense. And so this idea of my car is being used and so on, the car has a camera inside. If the car is damaged in any way, you know exactly who it is,
Yeah.
right? So it's different, I think. I think people will maybe take some time to think about what this really means, but in the end, I don't think they're going to pass up the money-making opportunity. When has a vehicle ever been a money printer?
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? It never really has for most people.
Again, you can use Turo. And
Yeah,
I've done that, and can be very profitable if you got the right car in the right market.
right.
Yep,
And this is an opportunity for everybody basically to turn their vehicle into a money-making machine.
exactly. Yeah.
Now, here's the other thing that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I posted about this a couple days ago. The minute that the Robotaxi network is up and running, the value of a used Tesla that has FSD or not goes up considerably.
Yeah.
Because now it has the potential to be a money-making machine. And even if you don't want your car to be a money-making machine, even if you're not willing, there'll be a fleet operator knocking on your door offering you 50% more for your car, or maybe even 100% more for your car. And it'll be too good to pass up.
Yeah.
Right? If you think your car today is worth $40,000 and they're offering you 80,000 for it, why wouldn't you sell it?
You'd definitely be tempted. You'd definitely be tempted.
Many people would. And the car essentially then floats to its highest and best use. If I'm not using it in the way that it should be used or can be used, then somebody else should.
Yes.
And they'd be willing to pay me for that. And the numbers that I've run actually show that the potential value increase of a used Tesla is actually pretty significant. And of course, if it has purchased FSD on it already,
Right.
it's even more.
Right.
And I think that's something that people are not yet appreciating, the value of their used Teslas. And Hertz, by getting rid of all their used Teslas now, I think are making a colossal mistake.
Yeah, especially, well, now maybe 4 months ago or 3 months ago when they did it, it may not have seemed like such a big mistake, but after having spent the weekend watching all these folks drive their Teslas on 12.3, they might be thinking, should we have fired that guy after all?
Yeah. Now they might have been a little early. They might have jumped the gun in terms of going EV the way they did.
Yeah.
But likewise, the pendulum has swung probably too far the other way now.
Absolutely.
And they may be missing an incredible opportunity.
Yeah. Cern, as always, your charts are beautiful. You need to teach me charting. That's a new form.
Very expensive skill, Randy.
It's really, really amazing. I know that these things, I don't know. Let's say, intellectually, I know that Microsoft and others make this kind of chart creation supposedly simple, but I have a sense that it's kind of as simple as using ChatGPT if you haven't been taught how to prompt.
I cannot wait for the day when I can just talk to my computer and tell it the beautiful chart I want it to make, and it does it for me.
Yes, that'd be great. And
that'll be my CERN GPT moment.
Yeah, they do to a certain extent. They just don't get current information.
Not quite there yet.
Data is not current. You can get great data from 20 years ago. All right, Cern, thank you as always for coming on and regaling the crowd here on this channel. And we are look forward to another set of charts and interesting stuff that will probably be on Saturday morning, is my best guess, with regard to current economic conditions. All right. Thanks
and a few things about Tesla in there as well.
and a few things about Tesla as well. Okay. Thanks again, sir. And to all
Thanks,
of you,
Randy.
it's been great talking to you.
Thank you.